Well, good morning once again. Praise band, doing a wonderful job today. We are starting a new series today called 40 Days of Joy. And from this past Wednesday all the way to Easter, that will be the focus of what I am doing. Not only are we doing this sermon series, but like I mentioned earlier, we'll have daily posts that you can read and encourage you when it comes to joy. And I don't know, just think for a quick moment. When's the last time you felt joyful? When's the last time God made you joyful? You know, and it is something that God promises. When we talk about the book of Ephesians, there's the fruits of the Spirit, and one of them is joy. Love, peace, patience, kindness, joy. And that is one of the ones that God promises that when He's present, when the Lord is present, that we look for joy to be one of those fruits that grows within us. And just like fruit, we can cultivate it in our lives, grow it in our lives, and even find ways to share that with the people around us. And just looking at our crowd today, I don't think there's any worries that y'all are going to not come next week because you've got too much joy in your life. I'm not seeing that on your faces today. I'm not seeing anybody's like, I've just got too much joy in my life right now. Anymore, I would overflow and bust. You know, it's something that we can all look for and grow in our lives. And I mean, the reality is that there's many things in our life and in our world that would steal our joy. Anytime we watch the news or read the news, there's always something, right, that wants to make us sad, make us upset, make us anxious, depressed. That is always a reality that we find in the news or in your own world. You know, we're always facing difficulty and hardship and challenges that come along the way. And so joy is something that we definitely need. And it's something that I hope and pray that we can cultivate in our own lives, grow in our own lives, because, man, there's just got to be something better than how most people live their lives, right? There's just got to be. Surely there's something better than the normal narrative that Americans live their life by. You know, get done with high school, find a good job, work your way to retirement, play a lot of golf, and die. It's kind of the whole narrative that we share with one another. Surely there's something better than that. And, of course, my contention is there is. And so that's what we'll be spending these upcoming weeks for, and hope and pray you'll come and join us today. Now, like I asked you earlier, what is it that brings you joy or that gives you joy in your life? I mean, I think about my own life. There are certain things that bring me joy and happiness, you know. The daily morning cup of coffee, my family, my friends, and then, of course, you know, good news. When you hear good news, something good happening for a friend of yours or a coworker, or when all of a sudden something that you thought would never get better suddenly does. It's always a joyful thing, good news. And we're going to look at one of my favorite pieces of good news that's found in the Bible today. It's found in Revelation chapter 1. If you got your Bible, Revelation's so simple to find. It's your last one before the maps. And so you can find Revelation chapter 21, and we'll be looking at the first 8 verses. It'll also be on the screen, or you can pull it up on your phone, or pretend you're looking at your phone while you scroll through whatever it is you scroll through. Whatever you need to do. Revelation chapter 21, verse 1 through 8. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and He will dwell with them. They will be His people, and God Himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." He who was seated on the throne said, "I am making everything new." Then He said, "Write this down, for those words are trustworthy and true. He said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty, I will give water without cost. From the spring of water of life, those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death." And so when I look at this passage, it's always so hopeful because it's talking about new heaven and new earth. Revelation is the last book of the Bible, and it gives an amazing picture of what will be. John has this revelation of what will be or how things will happen. And when we talk about heaven, Revelation is usually where Christians begin to describe it from. And I don't know what your thoughts on our heaven are like or how you imagine it, but it's normally not quite what we find in Revelation. Because in Revelation, it is that heaven is coming down and God is renewing all of creation, all of the world that we know, all the universe as we know it. Everything is being renewed, made new as God wants it to be. I mean, that's how we look at heaven, and it's coming down, and God's showing that everything is being made new, and God is coming to dwell and to be close with creation, with you and I, and all those who are His people. I mean, that's the description that we find, and it says it's breathtaking, it's wonderful, it's marvelous. One of the sentences that describes it, it says it's like a beautiful bride who's adorned for her husband. And I don't know, husbands, can y'all still remember the day you married her and how beautiful she looked and how wonderful she looked? Now, I still can. My wife, man, she looked astounding. And that's how they describe the new creation and the new heaven coming in. It's like, it's just beautiful and it's wonderful. And so it is a powerful image of heaven that we find in here. And why this matters so much is because it begins to describe the result of heaven coming close. It says that all of the things that are being made new are being corrected and fixed and restored and redeemed and healed. You know, whatever it is that you worry about in this world, whatever it is that you look at and go, that'll never get better, or that'll never be fixed, or that can never be corrected. All of that is being restored and renewed here in the 21st chapter of Revelation, all of it being made new. And the result of that, it says, every tear is wiped away, every mourning, every loss, all of that is being done away with. Like there's no more tears about losing somebody that we love. There's no more hurt over destruction that's occurring in the world. There's no more sorrow over war. Any of those things, all of them are going away and being made new when God brings about the new heavens and the new earth. All the crying, all the mourning, everything has passed away. So it's an amazing picture, a beautiful picture of what will be. And I can't tell you how many times I've read this passage, but each and every time it does something within me. Every time I read it, I think to myself, that's where my future ends up, right? So oftentimes we have a different story of how our lives are going to end up. So many times you and I convince ourselves that we're going to be failures, or our life will end in ruins, or it won't go well. And so this passage always reminds me and reorients my life and says, no. And what God is going to do and what God is bringing about, it's going to be good. It's going to be wonderful. And this passage is so hopeful in that when you and I lose somebody that we love, or we're facing death or illness or whatever it is we're struggling with, it can give us such hope. And to say, even if we're defeated, even if we lose, God is still going to bring about an amazing victory one day. So that's just a part of what we find in this passage. And then in verse 5, It says this, it says, "He who was seated on the throne said, 'I am making everything new.' Then he said, 'Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true.'" Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. Have y'all ever had a teacher that's like, "Write this down," or "This is important," right? Or like you have a parent that says, "Pro tip here, this is important." And this is what the writer of Revelation is doing. He's saying, this is essential. He says that one day God will make everything new. Verse 6, he says, "He said to me, 'It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children.'" So when we get this image of heaven, it's God drawing close, God restoring all things, God giving us everything we need, like water, and that we are together with our Creator and our God in a place of worship and thanks and joy. I mean, it's one of the most wonderful passages that we find in the Scriptures. And then verse 8, almost like a footnote, there's all these great things happening, and then verse 8 says, "But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all the liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. And this is the second death." And so after a vivid description of the beauty and the wonder and the glory of heaven, there's that little footnote where John says, and by the way, this group of people won't be there, right? And it may seem harsh to you, but realize up until this chapter, God has already destroyed Satan, God has destroyed death, God has judged the world, and now you are left with only those who are God's children and will spend eternity with God. That's all that's there. And so it may seem harsh that there's this list of people that says, they won't make it, they won't be in there, the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all the liars. They will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur, and this is the second death. And that group of people, I'm not here to judge or to label you. You might think of that and say, does that apply to me? But on the whole list, it's just people that were willing to settle for second best. It's people that chose to worship things of this world rather than the one true God. It's people whose hearts and lives were wrapped around something that really doesn't matter. They found their significance and their worth in something that this world offered them rather than worshiping the one true God. These are people who time and time again, rather than accept the free gifts of God, chose to fight for things they really didn't want. And when you read passages like this, you usually end up with two criticisms. The first off is that there's usually a group of people that look at the world that they're a part of and they say, could God really exist in a world where there is war, where there is illness, where kids get sick and die, where tragedy strikes, where all these bad things happen? Could God exist, and why does God allow that to happen? Maybe you've had that same question. Maybe you've said, if there's really a God, then why does God allow all these things to go on? Or you look at the news and you say, why won't God fix them? And Revelation 21 answers with the resounding, God will. God will set this world right. God will fix the things of this world. God will end war. God will end sickness. God will end whatever you might think of. That is the beauty and the power of that passage. The second criticism you oftentimes hear is, well, why doesn't God just allow that group of people in verse 8 to come on in? If God's a loving God, why can't all those people be with God? And the answer is, they chose not to be. They chose something instead of God. And it would be mean or cruel or unjust of God to simply say, well, even though you've rejected me your entire life and you've chosen other things rather than me, you still need to spend eternity with me. They've already made their choice. They've already made their statement. They've already decided what they worship and what they think is valuable. And God is simply letting them have their final choice. So those are two things. you may not care. I don't know. Maybe that's not a problem for you, right? But if you do find yourself in a predicament today and you're like, I really would like to spend eternity with God, but maybe it's not one of those things in verse 8 that's troubling you or a problem for you. Maybe it's something else. And time again, you've tried to correct your life or fix your life or be a better person, and you fail repeatedly. Maybe it's simply that you just don't really want a connection with God, and so you have been far from the church or far from God. Maybe that's the case for you. And this message of what will be and what will happen is troubling to you. I would simply say it's not a matter of needing just a little bit better. It's not a matter of somehow trying harder or doing a little better. You know, when something is ruined or broken or lost, it's not simply a matter of a light cleaning or a small repair. And it's not a matter of trying to change your ways or turn over a new leaf or anything like that. What you need today, what I hope for you today, what I pray for you today, is that you hear those words in verse 5 where God says, I am making all things new. You need to be made new. Another way of putting it is found in John's Gospel when Nicodemus comes to Jesus and says, what must I do? And Jesus says, you need to be born again. You need to start over. You need to have new life. And that's the promise that's found there. In Jesus Christ, we can be made new. The promise of heaven is that our bodies will be made new. And maybe you got like a bad hip or a bad knee, bad back. And God says, in heaven, brand new. Or maybe, in this life, you really enjoy chocolate cake. Do you know how amazing chocolate cake in heaven's going to be? It's going to be phenomenal, right? It's going to be great. And he says that will be made new too, right? That you'll have a new body, a new life. Things will be better. I think filet mignon in heaven's going to be fantastic, right? All those things. The saints are never going to lose, right? How do y'all... It could happen. Come on. Let me be hopeful, right? That all those things are made new. And it's not just a hope that happens on the other side of what God does, but it's a joyful thing that can happen in our life today. That you can have new life through Jesus Christ. That He is the one that can help you start all over again, to be made new from the inside out. He is the one that can destroy sin in your life, that can stop all those old habits. He is the one who can bring about change in your life and transform you, give you a new heart, and write His commands there for you to follow. That is what He can do. He says, I can make all things new, even you. Your heart, you might say, my heart is so stubborn and so hard and so difficult. Well, He can still make it new. Or you might say, I'm so stuck in my ways, I'm so locked into my patterns, there doesn't seem to be any help. I've tried and done everything I can. And Jesus says, rest, my child, I am making all things new. That's what He can do. Or if it's not you, maybe it's your spouse or your friend or a coworker or neighbor or something like that. Maybe you're strong in your faith, but they're so far from God, you wonder if there's anything that can be done. And verse 5 reminds us, He says, God can make all things new. I mean, it's one thing to deal with people who have small sins or not obvious sins. It's one thing to deal with people who kind of have sin in a manageable place in their life. It's a whole other thing when their lives are so overwhelmed by it that they're struggling with addiction and they don't even know who to turn to or who to trust or where to go to. And I would simply say, believe in what Jesus said. He can make all things new, even them. So call on him, plead with him, beg him until that blessing comes, until their salvation occurs. Keep praying for them, calling on Christ, trusting in what he can do, the one who can make all things new. Revelation 21:5. I hope that is sticking in your head by now. I hope it's like that little piece of steak that gets stuck between your teeth and you just keep on savoring it, right? Just keep on enjoying it all week. Let that be what carries you through this week, that reminder of a God who can make all things new, no matter how broken they are, how difficult they are, that he can make them new and help you to start over. That is the promise that is there for us, and it should bring you joy. Psalm 127 says, "He who goes out weeping, carrying his seed to sow, shall return with songs of joy." Over and over again, the Bible reminds us that even if sorrow should last all night, joy comes in the morning. He is the one that can do it. It does not depend on you. It is not up to you. He alone can bring that joy into your life. And that is my hope and my prayer for you.